I'm Ace Buchan. I'm a professional surfer from the Central Coast. Growing up on the Central Coast was a dream for a young kid that loved the ocean as much as I did and had this amazing playground to go and explore, to kind of have the chance to wake up and, watch the sunrise, pre-dawn light kind of turn into those beautiful blue and pink hues. Nature, in the way that it was kind of intended is really special. The beaches and the space that we have on the Central Coast has given me a lot of clarity, and it's kept me grounded. It's kept my keel upright when things have gone a little bit crazy in my life, and being able to glide along the face of a moving piece of ocean that's been generated hundreds of thousands of miles away, it's a feeling like no other. One of the things I really love about the Central Coast is that there are these beautiful kind of swathes of land that have been declared national parks, and as a child I was lucky enough to start experiencing that with my parents. To now go and do that with my kids is really special. Being able to kind of walk through the bush and not see anyone else and just kind of listen to the sounds and sometimes just drop the surfboards and go exploring, I feel pretty lucky to have access to. For tens of thousands of years, people have inhabited this land and looked after it and cared for it, and we need to respect this beautiful playground that we've been lucky enough to call home. It's something pretty special.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. Welcome to our community members that have joined us today, particularly those who are coming by webcast and also those who are in the public gallery. I will now declare the public forum open. Now, we hold this forum in order to hear from members of the community who have registered to speak on items that are before the council tonight. And I do ask that we respect those people who are speaking and listen to them in silence and with respect. And where people are speaking to something which is in fact a submission, can I just please remind them that for some reason we can't take your submission or what you're reading tonight as a submission. You must resubmit it. And I guess I'm particularly addressing that to Matthew. So please put the submission in separately so that it does go into as a formal submission. It can't go through as a formal submission when it's put into the council meeting via this mechanism. Just to remind everybody that the meeting is being webcast, and so please respect the fact that keep your phones off and remain seated and respect the COVID regs at this point in time. So first of all, I need to ask if there's any member of staff who have any conflicts of interest to declare. I don't believe there are. And just to remind the speakers that you have 3 minutes. Your presentation is being live streamed and recorded. And once you've concluded, you please remain at the podium, as I may have questions to ask, but I can't ask questions. We've ascertained that. And I note that the following people have requested to speak. So the first one is Matthew Wales on the draft street banner policy and draft flying of flags policy. Joy Cooper is coming, and she's contacted us to say she's on the way. So whilst I don't want you, Matthew, to take much extra time, if she's not here, you might have an extra minute or so. So with that, Matthew, would you like to commence? Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hudd, I can't hear anything on that side.
Can't you? Can we? Apologies. Can you hear? You can hear us now or not? No.
I'm not picking up any of the conversation whatsoever.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything, I'm sorry.
Mr. Wales, can you hear me okay?
I can now. It tends to drop in and out though, unfortunately.
Are we ready to go? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Liz, I can.
Good. Okay, well, do you want to fire away?
Yes,
We can hear you loud and clear.
I'm presuming you can hear me okay. Thank you, Mr. Hart, for providing time to address the council in relation to this matter. I'm speaking against the recommendation as it relates to the issue of using the Australian flag banners on the light poles in West Street, Jemina Beach. As you are aware, the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce and the local business community have been requesting for some considerable time for permission to install the Australian flag banners in West Street on Australia Day, as we have in the past. To our disappointment, Council has repeatedly declined to allow those installations, even though the Chamber is prepared to pay for the flags, again, as we have done in the past. The draft policy before you tonight sets in place specific restrictions that would prevent the Australian flag banners being installed and flown in any location in the LGA other than official flagpoles. Council's reasoning is that this ensures the Australian flag is flown in accordance with the state and federal government protocols. In the past, the Chamber has always ensured that the Australian flag banners have been prepared and installed in accordance with those protocols. This includes installing the flag banners directly under the lights so that they are illuminated at night. It should be noted that there are no official flagpoles in the Umina Beach Town Centre, and therefore, under this draft policy, it would prevent the Australian flag being flown on Australia Day and Anzac Day in our main street. It should also be noted that we do have written support from both the Parliamentary Secretary for the Central Coast, Adam Crouch, and from Diane O'Brien from the Mingaletta Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Corporation. We also have verbal support from the State Member for Gosford, Leslie Tesh, and the new Federal Member for Robertson, Gordon Reid, for our request to install the banners on Australia Day. I am at a complete loss as to why Council will not support our request, especially when it can be demonstrated that the Australian flag banners can be installed in accordance with those state and federal protocols. However, Mr Hart, there is a solution to the problem. Quite simply, the Council can insert a provision in the policy that says, provided the Australian flag banners are in accordance with the relevant state and federal protocols, they can be installed on the West Street light poles in Umina Beach. This request has been made with a sense of genuine pride in my country and my national flag, and I find it extraordinary that we now face a draft policy that specifically prevents this from happening. For this and a range of other reasons that we have previously communicated to you, I would request on behalf of our local business community and all those proud Australians who live on the peninsula that the restriction contained in the draft policy on flying the Australian flag be removed. Thanks, Mr Hart. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr Wales, and also thank you for your well-constructed submission. And as I said, could you please submit that as part of the formal process for consultation when we release this paper to go out for
I
consult.
certainly will.
Thank you. We'll move on to, I think Joy's arrived now. Yes, it's good. It's here. So, sorry, just Matthew, we will be, the paper's first up on the agenda, so when we come back, if you can log in then you can hear the paper, yeah.
Thanks, Mr Hart.
Ms Cooper.
Program update report to ensure my concerns are recorded on the public record. Tranche 1 sell-off lacked any community consultation and was listed on the council website late at night on Friday the 27th of November and was adopted on Monday the 30th of November. Some would say in haste, especially considering the long settlement period offered or accepted to the purchasers. So no time for community feedback, yet plenty of time for developers to lessen their risk and outlay. Also, there was no advice from Mike and Steve as their consultant positions were advertised the day after Tranche 1 sell-off was adopted. Who made the decisions as to which lots of land were to be part of Tranche 1 sales and how were those decisions made? While we were assured and promised by interim administrator person there would be no environmental land sold, one of the sites on the list of sale tonight was actually purchased by Wyong Council in 2015 for a price much higher than it was recently sold and was in fact purchased to be used as environmental offset. It includes an important wetland, endangered ecological communities, threatened species, and includes part of an important wildlife corridor. As I've asked before and will continue to ask, the method of sale should be included in the table which forms part of the council minutes and as part of the public record. The time between exchange and settlement should also be added. As the old saying goes, time is money, and the delayed settlement benefits the purchaser and not the ratepayers. So many of these sites have had long delayed settlements, and in a booming market, which it was, these sites were sold and benefit is clear to the purchaser and detrimental to all of the ratepayers. Recorded also in the council table of record of sale should be the agent's commission and the dollar value paid to the valuers that undertook the valuation. Let the public see. Since the profit target you set has been easily and quickly reached, I ask that you stop any further public land sales and accept the money that you have already received. In closing, in a rapidly rising real estate market, and let's face it, last year was not just red hot, it was white hot, with months from valuation to sale and 9 months from exchange to settlement, Central Coast Council managed to sell a property with a loss of 21% over 7 years. Did any staff consider consulting again with the valuer before proceeding with the sale? And if not, why? I'll finish my sentence if that's okay. There appears to be a pattern of procedure that little regard is given to objections in the past. Do you listen?
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Joy, for that. Have you got a written thing that you could leave with us at all? Thank you. That'd be useful. Okay, well that concludes the two speakers for now. So I will actually close the public forum and we will commence with the council meeting at 6:30. And as I mentioned, the item on the panel policy will be the first item up after the normal finance reports. So with that, we'll see you all again very shortly. Thank you.
Community Strategic Plan is the community's vision for the Central Coast for the next 10 years. It's called One Central Coast because this is the first plan for the whole of the Central Coast. We are one region, one council and one community. We live in a special place here on the coast, one in which we want all members of our community to feel valued and have access to a range of opportunities to participate in the richness of community life. And every one of us can play a part in bringing this community vision to life.
If people feel part of a community in some way, they'll give without probably even knowing they're doing it.
I wanted to restore this building and get it back to what it was. It was the jewel of the crown, and I wanted to get it back to that. Making a difference. I guess that's what we're really here for.
The smile on the faces when they see these engines and that bus coming around, they just love it.
If you're following what makes you happy and excited and interested, then you're definitely going to live a life that you will be thankful to have lived.
At the end of the day, we just had a good idea. We needed the support of many people to turn that great idea into a sustainable venture. My name's Tim Silverwood. I grew up on the Central Coast. It wasn't until I got a bit older and started travelling around the world I realised that what we had was so special because people don't always treat the environment as well as we do here on the Central Coast. Our programs have focused on going into schools and running events in communities. We also have a huge global online audience. One man cannot solve these big global problems. It's going to take a tribe of people coming together to solve them. It's a really amazing and rewarding journey in spreading this message around the world.
I've always been on the coast and I've loved the coast. About 6 years ago I bought the Chapman building. I got the opportunity, I saw that it was for sale and I stood back on the car park up there and a Village Central and I looked down and I could just feel this was the place to be. I could just see what the town was. There's always these little niches that are going back and forth and I guess it's an obsession for all of us because we saw what Wyong was like and it's getting it to a place where, we're proud to say, we're from Wyong. Like it's become a real proud place to be.
My name's Chris Wallace. Myself and my wife, we own Community Fire Education and the Fun Engine. We educate the community in a different way. We teach people what to do in case of fire. One of the biggest things is our education bus. What we do, we go out to different fates, festivals, wherever we can go. When we do the bus sometimes, we get 2,000 through that bus. I just enjoy communicating and getting out there and just educating in a different way.
I'm Meredith Gilmore. I've lived on the coast since 2000, originally from Sydney. Chose the coast because it's close to Sydney, but it's got that more laid back kind of thing that I like. I like living in regional areas. I started visual art in my 40s. It's just so different from what I ever thought that I'd ever do, and it is what led me into thinking it would be great to talk to people in the arts on the radio. So I started doing some shows, particularly a program called Coast Arts, which was a new show, and I reached out into the community because I'm an artist as well. And I just felt like there was a lot of scope on the radio to do interviews with artists and poets and writers, and that's been going now for over 7 years.
My name is Shauna O'Brien. I am from the Central Coast of New South Wales on Dark and Young land, and I'm a dancer. As an Indigenous dancer, we're very inspired by the environment and where we come from, all of the trees, the way that they curve around all of the rocks and the sea faces, the beautiful water, the fresh air, and that plays a huge part in the creative process. I was lucky enough to study at NASA Dance College, which was a super incredible experience, and the facilities, the studios are really beautiful, the staff are incredible, and I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. Through volunteering, I was able to meet a bunch of really great other young people in the community that are really passionate about helping other people, and that's a way of taking something that I'm very passionate about and sharing that with other people. No matter where I go to work or if I have to spend a lot of time in Sydney, I always come back to the Central Coast because it feels like home and it helps rejuvenate me.
One of the things about the Central Coast I've noticed as well, which is people are so helpful to each other. They collaborate, they are interested in going to each other's exhibitions, not just to see what people are doing, but so that there are people there. And you've got to be competitive, but you don't have to always be competitive with each other.
If you're in a position to make a difference, I guess you're obliged to make that difference, really. Just happy to, give it all I could, and it became, a local icon and a bustling place to be.
I'm Ace Buchan. I'm a professional surfer from the Central Coast. Growing up on the Central Coast was a dream for a young kid that loved the ocean as much as I did and had this amazing playground to go and explore, to kind of have the chance to wake up and, you know, watch the sunrise, pre-dawn light kind of turn into those beautiful blue and pink hues. Nature, you know, in the way that it was kind of intended is really special. You know, the beaches and the space that we have on the Central Coast has given me a lot of clarity, and it's kept me grounded. It's kept my keel upright when things have gone a little bit crazy in my life, and being able to glide along the face of a moving piece of ocean that's been generated hundreds of thousands of miles away, it's a feeling like no other. One of the things I really love about the Central Coast is that there are these beautiful kind of swathes of land that have been declared national parks, and as a child I was lucky enough to start experiencing that with my parents. To now go and do that with my kids is really special. Being able to kind of walk through the bush and not see anyone else and just kind of listen to the sounds and, you know, sometimes just drop the surfboards and go exploring, I feel pretty lucky to have access to. For tens of thousands of years, people have inhabited this land and looked after it and cared for it, and we need to respect this beautiful playground that we've been lucky enough to call home. It's something pretty special.
everybody once again. So again, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we are meeting today and pay my respect to elders both past, present and emerging. Welcome to the 26th of July 2022 Central Coast Council Ordinary Meeting. I will now declare the meeting open. Just a reminder again, this meeting is being webcast, and just please make sure your mobile phones are off or on silent. And again, with COVID, please make sure you stay seated all the time, and as you have done, please keep socially distanced. I will now make a few remarks about what's been going on, and I guess the severe weather event obviously takes precedence at the present point in time. It was the largest weather event to hit the Central Coast for some considerable time. It did see the biggest flood on the Tuggerah Lake since 1949, which incidentally is the year I was born, and the biggest flood on the Hawkesbury River in the last 100 years. Now, council staff did work very closely alongside the New South Wales State Emergency Service, coordinating activities and so on from the Emergency Operations Centre at Sharmhaven. And I'm very pleased to say that I believe the staff performed extraordinarily well. And I did have a meeting with Detective Superintendent Chad Gillies, who's the Tuggerah Lakes Area Commander, or in other words, the Wyong Area Commander, yesterday. And he, in actual fact, congratulated the organisation and the people he had dealt with in the organisation. He is what's called the LEACOM, which is, in fact, he is the person who is the coordinator of all the rescue events and so on. Whilst the SES are designated as the lead agency, it is the police through the LEACOM, which Chad is, who actually, I guess, coordinates it and puts the professional input into it. And I believe he did a pretty good job, and he also, as I said, made specific comment on how well the staff he had dealt with here had done over that event. I might add that, of course, we have had a wee bit of practice now, and of course that may have gone some way to making sure things worked very well. So I also want to thank the staff who really did participate in that. A lot of our staff, quite unbeknown to you, actually do volunteer in some of those agencies, volunteer agencies, so they're out there doing with that hat on and also their council hat on at other times. So there's a lot of coordination and cooperation that goes on from the council staff. And again, I just wish to congratulate them for obviously going the extra mile during the last weather event. So council and flood evacuation residents are now well into the recovery and clean-up efforts, but this is expected to take some time. We have just opened a further 3 centres, recovery centres at Wyong, San Reno and Chitaway. And hopefully that they will, people will take advantage of those centres. It's a place where you can go if you're affected by the flood, where you can talk to all the relevant agencies, including council, but you can talk to all the relevant government agencies that are supportive of people who've, had a tough time of it. And I've certainly encouraged people who are maybe listening, who have been affected, to actually take advantage of those centres. During that time, we had quite a few members contact the office here and the local MP's office, and they also, of course, were very good at passing on the information that we had. Now, I know that Mr. Bolgoff here, as road crews, since the 1st of July, have actually undertaken approximately 4,000 pothole repairs in over 400 different locations / streets across the Central Coast. It must be pretty disheartening to some of those road crews, because as fast as they do it, along comes another weather event, a whole bunch of vehicles go by, and of course the problem reoccurs yet again. So it is important to note that both the Commonwealth and the state government are providing some extra money to help out in us being able to try and catch up with more of that road repairs. The Central Coast dam levels reached record-breaking highs, and I think it's quite important to note that the Mangrove Creek Dam, for the very first time, reached 100%, and that actually equates to approximately 10 years of water supply for the entire Central Coast just in that one dam alone. So for the time being, we certainly have plenty of water. Just turning to some achievements here within the Central Coast. The Central Coast Council has won the Sport New South Wales Local Council of the Year Community Sports Award, which recognises contributions to the community in sport and active recreation. And I have to say that's great that we are still continuing to deliver innovative approaches to participation, access, inclusion and promotion of local sport and active recreation. And again, it's a good testament to staff to be able to be coming out of the recovery phase of the financial situation, to be able to be still seen to be doing their job and doing it in an innovative way, which can win awards. So particularly want to congratulate that team and Brett Shearer for this outstanding award. Very shortly, the 2022 Commonwealth Games will kick off, and certainly I will be an active participator on the couch, watching some of that. And I guess the good thing about that is, of course, it's in our evening and night as compared to during the day. So I guess there will be a few late nights around. We are very, very proud of the Central Coast athletes who have dedicated so much of their lives to be the best they possibly can in their selected sport, and we wish them all the best with the Commonwealth Games over in the UK. In the 2022 Local Government Week Awards, we're in the running for 2 awards at the 2022 Local Government Week Awards. Our communications team are in the category of excellence in communications for communication during Council's financial recovery, and our planning department are in the category of Local Government New South Wales Planning Awards for the Central Coast Green Grid, Our Place project. I wish both those teams the best of luck for the 4th of August when the awards will be announced. Just again a reminder to people out there who have dogs, or maybe if you don't have a dog, that the draft Dogs and Open Spaces Action Plan is currently open for consultation. We've had so far over 500 community members have their say, but I urge all community members to get involved, read the draft action plan, view the interactive map and provide feedback on the local off-leash areas. And just remind us that feedback is accepted up till the 26th of August via Your Voice, Our Coast website. And this Friday also marks the very last day at Council for my very highly efficient Executive Officer, Cass McNamara. Cass joined the Central Coast Council in 2020, and in her role, Cass has demonstrated resilience, political acumen, dedication and non-stop energy. Her professionalism and commitment are a credit to her, and the organisation has left better for having had her as part of its team over the last 2.5 years. I have to say, as having someone like Cass in the office has been absolutely fabulous, and she's certainly kept me on the straight and narrow and helped me adjust a bit more to the administrator role, moving from a CEO role. So I really do want to thank Cass for her valuable contribution. At the moment, she's in the air, returning from overseas. The other side of Cass is that she's effectively a professional athlete, and she's been competing, representing Australia in Canada for the World Triathlon Championships, where she's competing in her age group, and she finished 20th out of 60 plus contenders, and she actually achieved personal bests in both the swim and the bike. So she sort of kind of finished on a high at the council. I'd like to think we had a role in that. So she's moving on to be the Deputy CEO of the Glen, which a lot of the people in the audience will know about. And I have to say to the Glen, they are very lucky to have her. And so I really do want to note for the record that she's moving on and that she's been a fantastic addition to the organisation, and we wish her well in the future. The other thing, I'm going to just test the audience briefly, if you like. In the past, when I've been involved as a CEO, I might add, in councils that have been in administration, we have had, after the council meetings, which tend to be shorter than a normal typical council meeting when you've got a full council in place, where we actually would mingle afterwards with those members of the community who want to stay behind and have a cup of tea and have a yarn about things. I'm quite happy to do that, and I know the CEOs, and I'm sure one or two of the executive would be happy. So Now, what can I have by just a show of hands, people who might be interested in having that opportunity if we were to install it into the regularly after each council meeting? Excellent. Well, that's a great... As I said, I think you'll get the main players there. I will definitely turn up. I know Mr. Farmer will turn up because I will ask him to, and some of the executive will definitely turn up. And I think it's a good opportunity we found in the past, or I found in the past, to just exchange ideas, and without having to go through the drama of backs and forth through the formal process, but to actually share ideas and so on. And often you do find common ground when you're talking in that environment. So right from next Tuesday next month, whenever that is, we will organise a cup of tea and some refreshment for people to stay behind and catch up with us after the meeting. So mark the diaries. With that, I will conclude my opening remarks and move on to item 1.1, which is disclosures of interest. Now, I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. Any of the executive? No. So we're all good there. So we will actually look to move the recommendation that is shown on the screen and make that as a decision of council. Item 1.2, which is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I can confirm that the minutes are accurate, so I will now move to resolve the resolution that is shown on the screen. Item 1.3, which is notice of intention to deal with matters in closed session. I now resolve to adopt the resolution that is disclosed on the screen because we do not have any matters to deal with in closed session. We get to the substantive part of the agenda, item 2.1, which is, of course, as is traditional now here at this council, it will be the monthly finance report, and for June 22, which actually is in fact our unaudited year-end results. And I will now ask the CEO, Mr. Farmer, to just make some commentary about it.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. You stole my thunder to an extent that these are not just the June monthly results, but they're in fact the preliminary financial results for the year, the financial year to the 30th of June 2022. And they are draft and preliminary, and they're subject to change, but we anticipate that they won't move up or down more than around $5 million with end-of-year adjustments and accruals, etc. So with that, that caveat, the preliminary results are a $46.4 million surplus before capital amounts, and included in this is almost $26 million in gain on disposal of land, which is a result of land sales, some of which are reported later in the agenda. The $46 million surplus is a $117 million turnaround from the $70 million lost last year, which was preceded by a $90 million loss the previous year. Consequently, Council will need a number of years of substantial surpluses to repair the damage from those big losses. The major contributors to this turnaround were a $60 million increase in income, of which $26 million of that was profit on sale of assets, but importantly a $57 million decrease in costs, including a $55 million reduction in employee costs. And as we head into the new financial year, we have to be diligent to maintain our surplus as we confront a very high inflationary environment, but our incomes, such as rates, have been capped at a 1% increase, and we've frozen the domestic waste charge for the current financial year. Council's cash position continues to improve, with unrestricted cash balances in general fund of $120 million compared to a negative balance at the same time last year. Council's debt continues to fall and currently sits at $313 million. Council's capital works expenditure totalled $107 million for the year. This is lower than planned, impacted by the extended wet weather and significant supply shortages on a global scale. This underspend of approximately $66 million less than the original budget has contributed to the current high cash holdings of Council. We'll be working to improve capital works delivery processes and intend to catch up in our capital program over the future years within our 4-year capital works program. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. I'll have to say Mr Farmer stolen all my thunder as well. It has been a good year. And I think we can safely say that the turnaround is complete to the extent from the financial perspective. There's still a lot of hard work to do inside the organisation to improve, how we do things and the productivity, if you like, within the entity. But those things are things we can now work on inside the organisation without the financial pressure that we've had. And I will take this last opportunity to just mention that November 2020, when I arrived up here with Dick Person, 2nd of November, I recall it only too well, when we had, as best as we could ascertain, within a week or two, we had to find money to be able to pay the wage bill. The state did advance the council, they advanced a FAGS grant, which covered a bit over a week's of the employee costs. But after that, we were back into having to delve into utilising unrestricted cash, which the government had made clear to both Dick and myself that they would have to sack us if we again dipped into those funds. So there's just no option to go to banks, and to provide and get commercial settlements, which is why we ended up going very quickly with a list of assets sales, which was the 60-odd million target, because there was only one bank, you will recall, that would talk to us, and one of their conditions was that we immediately got underway $60 million worth of asset sales, restructure the organisation, taking that high cost structure of approximately 50 million out of the employee line, and putting increasing the rate level by 13% plus the rate cap of 2%, and also, as we're also aware, adjusting the water and sewer and drainage fees back to a level they were prior to IPART, removing them back in 2019. So to recall the numbers, the raw numbers that we were faced in that first week or two, we had about $360 million worth of, $365 million worth of bank debt at the time. We had $200 million negative in our cash position, which we had utilised unlawfully from the internally and externally restricted reserves. And we'd just completed a year where the council lost $89 million. The following year, a lot of the costs of the restructuring of the organisation and so on were taken up, and we posted a $71 million loss. So that was at the end of June last year. So over the 20 months that I've been here, first of all 6 months in the CEO role and the latter part in the administrator's role, we've moved from that position to now, as Mr Farmer has outlined, where we only have $313 million of bank debt. We're making a $46 million surplus, and I use a slightly different number from Mr Farmer, but I'll explain it. We have $83 million or thereabouts of actually unrestricted cash. Mr Farmer talked about a number of 121 million. All I've done is we still have a negative balance in the water fund and in the drainage fund, so I've just taken those off that 121 to come to a net figure of $83 million. And that is a healthy position for any organisation. So that turnaround has occurred in 20 months, and it now puts the organisation in a position where it can look to improve the way it does things and how it does things. So I'm looking forward to that, but it is a great result. It will change slightly those numbers because, as Mr Farmer pointed out, there are adjustments that will be made, and no doubt there's probably another change in accounting practice where Audit New South Wales will want us to do something a little different again. But by and large, I think we've covered off most of Audit New South Wales' concerns for completing this last financial year. And so I'm looking forward to actually Audit New South Wales coming in and having a slightly easier ride, I hope, this time round than we've had in the past. But with that, I'm just going to receive the monthly financial report and have that as a decision of council. Now, item 2.2 is the investment report for June 2022, and Mr Farmer again.
Thank you, Mr Administrator, and you stole a little bit of my thunder in this one. As at the 30th of June, Council had $652 million in cash and investments, and of that, $447 million was in restricted funds. And restricted funds can only be allowed to be spent on specific purposes for which they were collected. So they may be grants to be spent on specific purposes, they may be developer contributions to be utilised in certain ways, or they are water and sewer funds or domestic waste management funds which were paid for that purpose, and we can only spend them on those purposes. The sewer fund and the domestic waste fund are in surplus in terms of unrestricted cash, but the water fund had a $3.5 million negative balance, and the drainage fund had a $35 million negative balance. And these are funded by available cash in the general fund and is part of the resolution that is proposed. We anticipate that over the next few years that the water fund will be able to return to having a positive cash position, but the current income stream of drainage fund will not be able to sustain that, and we anticipate folding the drainage fund into the general fund for display purposes to better demonstrate the financial position of Council. In terms of investment, Council has funds with approved deposit institutions, essentially banks, in both a mix of fixed and floating rates for periods of call to 5 years. And as I said, we now have quite a healthy cash position, and we'll be looking to build that and then utilise those funds for the good of the community going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. And can I ask, are we providing a little bit more money, I think, having raised a bit of cash into areas where we're suffering pressure?
In the budget, we were able to allocate additional funds to DA assessment planning staff because there's some unsatisfactory timelines for people lodging development applications, be they large developments or mums and dads wanting to extend their house. We've applied additional funds into road maintenance and to maintenance of public open space, parks and vegetation. And so we've been able to harvest some of our better than anticipated performance and put them into the budget this year.
Thank you. I think that's good news. Hopefully we can, we'll see the benefit of that flow through, and that'd be quite good, hopefully, if the weather improves for Mr. Olgoff to actually get some of those road repairs done. But unfortunately, we are weather dependent on some of that. So with that, I wish to resolve the resolutions that are shown on the screen and adopt those resolutions of the investment report for June 2022. Item 2.3, and I hope, Mr. Matthews, you are able to view this at this point in time, because we are now considering that. So I'm going to ask Ms. Smith just to introduce the paper, if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Due to the increasing interest from businesses and community organisations to utilise the flag and banner infrastructure, Council's developed a draft formal management framework to ensure that the intent of these assets is articulated and the processes to access them are clear. The aligned approach will provide a simplified and unified way for the community to access the infrastructure with some improvements, including one booking system for all relevant infrastructure, clear design and content guidelines and banner specification, of banners, removing the community, that responsibility from community groups to coordinate that themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Just out of interest, how many sort of flag poles, whatever, have we got in the peninsula at the moment, just down that part of the world?
My understanding is that there's 20 different flagpole infrastructure sites down in the peninsula area.
Okay. Look, I have to thank Mr. Wales for his contribution, and I hope he has put his contribution in as a formal submission to this draft policy. I think Mr. Wales actually does make one or two good points. There's a particular point that I am somewhat taken with, and that is I was was not aware that there is no flagpole at all in the Umina retail strip. So I'm going to actually ask Ms Smith if she can, in fact, have a look at that and have a look and see whether a flagpole can be positioned there, and to report that back on the same time frame as we're coming back on the consultation of this report. Now, that's without prejudice thing, it is not necessarily connected. I just think that the fact that there is no ability at the present time to actually fly a flag there, and I understand Mr Wales' concern about that, so I'm certainly going to pick up that point and ask you to have a look at that if you may. Otherwise, the purpose of consultation is to get views from the community about what they think. I have had people express to me that on some things can be divisive and so on. So I'm going to allow what's there now, without any alteration, to go out for consultation. And we'll allow, how long are we going to allow for that, Ms Smith?
I understand it's going out on consultation for 28 days.
28 days, so it'll be out for 28 days. And I certainly encourage people in the community to actually think about it. If you like, banners and flags, I mean, I guess the question is, are they interchangeable or are they not? The banners were originally concepted by most council as a means to promote sharing, promote what some good things that people / organisations do, to try and bring some sort of, you know, make sort of streetscapes a bit more alive and so on. So there was a lot of reasons behind banners. Now, I think if the community can actually respond and give some comments back on that, then we can take it on board and address the policy, which hopefully will meet with, you know, good community acceptance. So I would encourage people of the community to put that in. I thank Mr Wales for putting that in so far. And as I said, I do think that Umina probably is deservative of at least a flagpole at the very least. So with that, I'm going to endorse the policy to go out for consultation and particularly request that the community respond to it. So with that, I will resolve the resolutions to enable that to take place as on the screen, and we will wait for the report to come back as a summary of all of that. Item 2.4, which is activities of the Development Assessment and Environmental Compliance Service Unit. Mr Milliken, who's the Acting Director of Environment and Planning, would you like to make some comments on that, please?
Thank you, Mr Administrator, and I believe we have some slides for this item. So this item is the 6-monthly report of the activities of the Development Assessment Unit and the Environmental Compliance Services Unit, who assist the DAU in their assessment program. This first slide here shows the development application lodgements over the past 3 years, with the green line being the current year. And you'd note there's a bit of a drop-off, or a significant drop-off in January and February, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, but that's when we brought in a new pathway computer system. So we didn't, for a couple of weeks there, we weren't lodging development applications, but then they quickly ramped up once that software came back online, and I'll touch on that a bit later in terms of some of the improvements we're putting in place. The next slide looks at the determinations per month over the past 3 years, and as you can see, there's been a slow but steady decline in the number of DAs we determine per month, as shown by the red line there. The lower months tend to be the significant drop downs. They're probably your Christmas periods, when you know we're on holidays and we have less staff available. But this is a bit of a trend that we're keen to arrest and turn around and start increasing the amount of work or the amount of DAs we determine each month. What that slide means is on the next slide, the determination times for development applications has been creeping up. And this is due to a number of reasons. One, the amount of applications that we have coming in. At the start of COVID, we had a lot of applications come in from people, you know, doing small-scale developments at their homes on the Central Coast, people moving up into the Central Coast from Sydney and making their temporary houses their permanent houses. So we had a lot of development applications coming in. combined with, of course, as we touched on before, we had some, coming out of the financial situation, we had a reduction in staffing numbers, which those two things combined together with COVID and the impact of less staff during that period have all combined to that to be lifting up those determination times, which is something we don't want to see and something we'd like to turn around. And that culminates in, on the next slide, our number of outstanding applications. So these are ones that are in the system that we haven't determined yet. That's creeping up to around about 1,000, which is definitely not what we want to see. But we had hoped by now that we would have seen that start to trend down, given some of the improvements we've put in place. But over the past couple of months, we've again been hit by staff shortages due to COVID. So it's taking a little bit longer for that to turn around than what we'd hoped. On the next slide, just talking about what we're doing to turn that corner and I guess, as we said, force that trend line down again. I guess one of the challenges we've had is, although we've been able to get some money, filling those roles in a competitive market has been challenging. But that's started to happen now. We've got 5 vacant roles that have been filled. We've offered 6 temporary contract staff, and we're about to commence recruitment of 8 new planning roles. So if anyone in the audience out there knows any planners, please tell them to get in touch with us. As I mentioned earlier, the pathway integration, which was really bringing our 2 software systems from the former councils together into one, that's now been complete. It did mean that we were offline for I think it was about 10 or 11 days. But now that that's online, we've got one system which is much easier for our staff to work with. There's only one system to learn, and it's much more efficient. We've also recently had the gazettal of the Central Coast Local Environment Plan, which, similar to the pathway integration, brings our 2 planning frameworks together into one framework. So that means our planners only need to know one system. There's only one way of doing planning business on the Central Coast, which will lead to efficiencies. And it also means we can now look at how we structure our planning team. We've had it split into a North team and a South team, generally because of the LEP framework. Now that we're going to have, from the 1st of August, so next week, we'll have a single LEP, so we can start looking how we can make that team operate more efficiently. We're working on our DA tracker, so we get a lot of queries from the public about our DA tracker, which is the tool that tells people where DAs are up to and what's on exhibition and provides information to the public. That hasn't been as great as we'd like. As the Department of Planning's portal upgrades come online, we need to keep upgrading the DA tracker to talk to that. But we've been working with the department to get a better solution for that. So hopefully we'll get that online in the not too distant future. And also we're looking at bringing in new planning software. So now that we've got a single way of doing business, both with the pathway and the LEP, we can bring in new software, more contemporary, up-to-date planning software that will help our planners get more efficient. At the moment, we're still going through that COVID and influenza impact in the team, but we do hope, or we do think by the next time we bring this report up in 6 months' time, we will see those determination timeframes coming down, the backlog decreasing, and a much more efficient planning system. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Milliken, for that very full explanation. Because on the surface, it's quite concerning when you see those graph trends going up like they have. And that means, when you've got that number of outstanding and that total time delay, clearly that's having an impact on the community. So I'm pleased to see that we are able to be doing something about it. As Mr. Farmer mentioned, we have allocated some more money, so that I'm assuming is the part of the new roles that you're going to have in there. And from what my maths is correct, you should have, for at least 12 months, you should have another 14 people in there, which should make a big difference on the basis that we can actually attract them. The integration of the software, particularly Pathway, shouldn't be underestimated. This is a major piece of software for the organisation, and having to bring together very disparate systems from both the former Wyong and former Gosford has been a major handicap to us and to the teams to be able to actually work and operate. And because of that, and the fact that we had two separate LEPs, meant that, as Mr. Milliken mentioned, we have to have two separate teams. So they don't, because they get expertise of working in one LEP and one bit of software versus the other one, the other team, then they're not interchangeable easily. So the way it will be redone now is it's, at least they're operating with the same software, so you can now look at dividing it up. I think you're thinking about dividing it up into sort of like mum and dads and large businesses, so it's sort of split up a different way, but working right across the patch as opposed to working in areas. So some of those things should have been done a long time ago. You know, it's unfortunate they weren't priorities of the earlier council and the earlier management and political body, but nonetheless, I think we have pretty much achieved it now. And hopefully with the new planning software, which is also, because some of the software is not going to be supported into the future, and there is much better software available, which we're in the process of, I think, our pretender for now. So when all of that comes together, I'm certainly hopeful that we will see a big improvement. If we don't, Mr. Milliken, I will have to ask the question why. So with that, I will ask the council to note the report on that as the resolution is shown on the screen. We now move to item 2.5, which is also Mr. Milliken, which is a report on outcomes of the public discussion of Council's LEP amendment request policy.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The other, I guess, assessment process that our planners do in the strategic planning area is planning proposals, otherwise known as rezonings, which is different to development assessment. And while we have a whole heap of policies related to development assessment, we haven't until now had a policy related to how we manage LEP amendments, or otherwise known as planning proposals or rezonings. So in April, we brought a draft policy up to council for permission to put on an exhibition, which we've done for 28 days, and we received one submission from the UDIA, which is a quite detailed submission, so thank you to them for taking the time to do that. That's informed some minor amendments to the policy to address those matters. For example, some direct links through to supporting procedures, clarity on the role and requirement of pre-lodgement meetings, which are really important so we can get in ahead of the game and talk to proponents about what will be required to achieve the outcomes thereafter, and also references through to the plan-making guidelines from the Department of Planning and Environment. So after that 28-day period, one submission, we're presenting the policy to council tonight for endorsement.
Thank you. Well, this is obviously a very necessary improvement again to try and speed things up. I think the, if you like, the mechanism of using pre-lodgement for both DAs and for planning proposals now will speed the system up. What happens in that through the pre-lodgement, that's an informal discussion, if you like. It goes through what the proponent wants. Staff can give a bit of feedback about whether it's shaped up properly or where there's going to be issues or problems. And then the proponent can take that on board, go away, and then come back with something that is more likely to be able to be approved or has got a potentially a faster track forward because they've already sorted out some of the issues that were raised in the pre-lodgement meeting. So having that for both the planning proposals and for or rezonings, as Mr. Milliken said, and obviously for just the standard DAs, that mechanism is a definite way forward, and most councils actually use that nowadays. So it's great to see again that we're putting in place those systems here. So again, I'm just going to move that on and agree to the recommendations that are shown on the screen and resolve those as a decision of council. Item 2.6, which is modification to a planning agreement at 137 Johns Road. Wadalba.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And speaking of planning proposals, here's one that we prepared earlier.
Right there.
So in 2018, we did a rezoning at this address in Wadalba to rezone it for a residential subdivision. At the time, we entered into a planning agreement with the proponents, which was negotiated at that planning proposal stage before the subdivision design was known and all the details associated with the development were known. Now we're just amending that planning proposal to update the works and land dedication so it's consistent with the approved subdivision. So all the original components of the planning agreement remain. This is just more information and agreement with the proponent about what will be provided as part of that subdivision. The modifications to the planning agreement were exhibited for 28 days with no submissions. There's no impact on Council's capital works program, as the developer will be completing the works themselves. And on that basis, it's recommended the modifications to the planning agreement be endorsed by Council.
So I guess the net result of all of that, there is no real change to what the council receives and what the council gets for its money. So that's great. I'm more than happy to agree with that. So let's move to accept the resolution that is shown on the screen for the modification to that planning agreement. Item 2.7, which is the planning proposal, another one coming up thick and fast, for 39 Dell Road, West Gosford.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I believe there are a couple of slides for this one. So this is a planning proposal that was considered by Council in April. We're still at the end of the planning proposal process for this one, and the reason it's coming back to Council is there was a mapping anomaly identified between Council endorsing the planning proposal and us at Council sending it off to the Department of Planning to be for the plan to be made. So the next slide will show just the difference in where that mapping anomaly is. So the purple shaded area is the boundary of the industrial zone considered in April, and the red line is where that boundary will be moved to as part of just tidying up this planning proposal. So there's no change to the planning proposal itself. It's just making sure the maps submitted for gazettal into the LEP are technically correct.
Thank you. And again, there's obviously the council doesn't lose anything out of that at all. So again, I'm happy to move that recommendation as is shown on the screen for that planning proposal at 39 Dell Road, West Gosford. Item 2.8, which is the Privacy Management Plan. So in accordance with the Privacy and Personal Protection Act, Council is required to prepare and implement a management plan that outlines its policies, protocols and procedures in relation to privacy and protection of personal information. We are required by the Act to have that in place, and we're also required to update it. So this has internal consultation. It's applicable internally inside the organisation, and that's been out for consultation with inside the organisation, and we've made the final adjustments to bring it up to date. So I'll agree to the resolutions that's on the sheet. We do have an additional resolution that I'll need to put up because I want the Chief Executive to be able to make some minor editorial amendments. So by putting that into the resolutions at number 4, that enables the CEO to actually just change some of the language in there and maybe correct a point that has been raised. So with that, I'm going to support those recommendations and adopt them as a decision of Council. Item 2.9, which is the acquisition of part of 93 Warnervale Road and so on in Hamlin Terrace for the purposes of road widening. The actual valuations are in a confidential component, but in terms of the process and the principle, it is in the paper that is there. It's a fairly clear-cut thing. We are looking to actually improve the particular area in terms of road and drainage there. There's full road reconstruction which will take place, new curb and channel, shared pathways and an upgraded culvert crossing. Now, it's going to be providing for a 1 in 100 year flood. I hope that's enough, Mr. Bolgoff, in this day and age. We seem to be getting up to those levels fairly regularly. And the road widening is necessary to provide an area, particularly for the proposed shared pathway and for future utilities go in. And it will also align with the current boundaries that also along the rest of Warnervale Road. So we are in discussions with the landowners, and there's 3 properties I think affected, and so we're in discussions with those and we'll come to a resolution of that. But obviously, I think it's a good bit of work that needs to be done, and with that, I'm happy to pass the resolutions of council there to enable the acquisitions to take place. Item 2.10, which is the Audit and Risk Improvement Committee membership. That is a committee that has 3 members on it. They provide an extremely valuable role in helping keep the financials of the organisation on track. They also play a very useful role in monitoring the council's ability to push off cyber attacks and also to look at all elements of risk that the organisation is perhaps under threat from. So they have a bit of a wider brief than just financial. Of course, financial has been our principal interest up to now, but with that largely under control, of course, we now need to look at the other threats or risks to the organisation. So it's important that we maintain that and we get good people on it. Mr. John Gordon, who I've known for quite a large number of years, according to the policy, has to retire from the committee, and I certainly wish him well and thank him for his efforts publicly. I'm not sure whether I've done that previously, but certainly, John, I'm not sure, I suspect you're not listening, but nonetheless, thank you, John, for your efforts in here, and particularly for my association with you, because I guess that will finish now, with over a large number of years where John's provided expert advice to not just myself as a CEO, but also to councillors and mayors for many, many different councils. And I think he's still on the audit committees of some 11 bodies at this point in time. So we ran a process to get a new person on board. The selection committee wasn't necessarily comfortable that there was a good enough applicant there, or one who met all the attributes we were looking for. So we pushed the pause button at that point in time, and we went and, if you like, headhunted people. And we did find a person who we're very happy with. The CEO, Mr. Farmer, I think had a discussion with him, and he's comfortable with the individual. So Mr. Peter McLean came to the top, and I've met him in the past, and I have to say he's a very good operator, and he'll be a very good replacement for John Gordon. So with that, I'm going to approve the recommendation here, which was to appoint him, I think, for 3 years to the Audit and Risk Committee. Item 2.11, which is the Council's Asset Sales Program. I'm just going to ask the Acting Director of Corporate Services, Christy Bryant, to just make a couple of comments and respond to Ms. Cooper's, some of her questions and points of view.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. As the report indicates, Council resolved to sell the land at Cynthia Street, Batto Bay in 2016. However, that remained unsold since that resolution. The land at Thompson Vale Road, Dawson, was also resolved to be sold at Council's meeting of the 30th of November 2020 on the open market for not less than the market valuation. To provide, I suppose, a little bit of understanding as to the timeline events post that, so shortly after that last resolution, a tender process was undertaken to appoint an agent, which occurred in March. A marketing campaign was undertaken across the months of April and May, and negotiations occurred with registered parties up until September 2021. There were originally 7 registered parties, however, the interest dropped off quite early on in the negotiations. To your point, Mr. Administrator, and if it assists to speak directly to some of the points raised by Ms. Cooper earlier tonight, both sale methods for the properties are outlined in the report. So in relation to the property at Thompson Vale Road at Doylestown, the land was sold through an external agent via a competitive expression of interest, and a contract was entered into with the successful proponent on the 28th of September 2021. In relation to Cynthia Street at Batto Bay, the land was sold through an external agent again by auction, and a contract was entered into with the successful bidder on the 6th of April 2022. In relation to the settlement timeframes, which I know Ms. Cooper referenced tonight, for conveyancing of residential transactions, a normal period provided is 42 working days. In the case of large commercial transactions, however, with complex funding requirements, it's common practice to afford purchasers extended settlement periods to organise appropriate finance arrangements. Importantly, Mr. Administrator, all contracts have concluded successfully in the timeframe required to adhere to Council's financial obligations with its financiers. Finally, in relation to the environmental value of Thompson Vale Road, in 2014, the former Wyongshire Council resolved to purchase what was then referred to as the Woodbury Park Estate, and is of course now known as Thompson Vale Road, Dawson, with internal documents stating that the 100 plus hectares of rural transition land would be developed into industrial land. The remaining environmental conservation land is dispersed across the site and can't be subdivided from the main lots, which has of course resulted in the 4 lots needing to be sold in one line, meaning together. Again, importantly, I think the zoning remains in that the environmental conservation land can't be developed due to the current zoning of the land, and that needs to be retained for ecological preservation. Finally, again, I'd just like to take the opportunity, I think, to reinforce that the sale of these properties was a competitive market process run by an independent licensed commercial real estate agent, and obviously the results of that have contributed significantly to Council's financial recovery. Thank you, Mr Administrator.
Thank you, Ms Bryant. Yes, there's been some interesting commentary on this particular one. I think it's pertinent to just go back to the early points we talked about. I've mentioned it in the change between what we found in November 2020 to where we are now. It was one of the properties that was put into the sales program, and the comment's been made that we shouldn't rush. All I can say at the time, as I said, we had a bit over a week's cash to pay wages, and we had to get an agreement from a bank to get $100 million. You can call it what you like, but our requirement was to have a clear list of assets for sales to the bank, which they wanted to hold title over. If we couldn't, on other assets, on the basis if we couldn't realise the sales of those. So when you're faced with that situation, you do go to market. Now, I proposed to the Administrator at the time that we put in place, over and above the staff and the Council running the process, that we put in place a small little group of 2 people from the private sector, both very experienced in managing and looking and assessing these types of proposals for sale and how to go to market. And in fact, people that I used in Parramatta, and they were formally put together by the Parramatta Council, these representatives in that council, to actually oversee the sales of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of land and car parks, including a joint venture with Lang Walker of approximately $32 billion. So very experienced people. So we had them oversighting exactly what had been going on in these. So they ticked off over the top of the staff report about what they accepted and what they didn't, and was it fair and reasonable. So that's the first point. I do pick up a point of Joy's that I think is valuable again, and I'm going to ask the CEO just to bring a paper to the next council meeting which lists all the asset sales in one place, so that can be easily seen and available to the community, all the asset sales in one place, which will be just a paper to note for the council, but at least it will put on the public record exactly what we've sold and what we got for it. And I guess we can probably add into that the mention of how we actually sold it, whether it was auction, private treaty, or whatever else we did. So I'm happy to do that and get that onto the public record. I think it's also important to note, as the CEO mentioned earlier, that there was $24 million of surplus over and above book value. And when you actually do that as a percentage, that's a 35% increase. So I think we did capture overall, right across the whole bailiwick of those sales, we did capture a fair bit of the uplift. In actual fact, works out at a bit over 35%. So that's actually, I think, a pretty good gain. And I think the last point that Ms Bryant mentioned is worthy of note. According to the council records, the land was purchased for industrial purposes in the future. And of course, if that was the case, then you would pay a reasonable price for it. as it turns out, with the restrictions on it, etc., it's not. So it was actually sold as 4 lots of residential large blocks, which was the highest and best use. And that's why you end up with what looks like a $1.5 million, inverted commas, loss on purchase. But all I can say is we weren't around. None of us were around at that time, but that's just what the council records show. That's the purpose for that, that was the purpose for that particular purchase. So all I can say to that is the previous council, Wyong, in inverted commas, on that basis paid over the top. And what we achieved was the market price. There were, I think, I'm correct in saying seven people, if you like, bidding for it or talking to it. And that was, someone's talking up there all the time, can that stop, please? Thank you. So I think we can safely say that there was too much paid for it. We got the market price, and that's correct. And as I said, overall, when you put all those packages together, what we sold, the whole $62 million worth, it does equate to a 35% gain above book value. So with that, and with the additional requests, which I think I don't need to resolve anything, council staff will carry that out for a report for next council meeting. I'm going to move the acceptance of that land and note that it's been removed from the council's register as per the resolutions that are shown on the screen. Now we move to item 2.12, which is the Community Sports Grass Program. I guess it continues what approximately every 3 months I think we come to council with this, which is we allocate approximately $300,000 per annum for people to, for this grant program. And this particular paper proposes that we allocate $8,870 to Terrigal Trotters Incorporated and Gosford Preschool Incorporated. And from that fund, and I congratulate them on putting forward successful applications. And with that, I'll move those recommendations as shown on the screen. And with that, I will declare the meeting closed at 7:27 and wish everybody a good evening. And look forward to next council meeting, catching up with people afterwards for a cup of tea or coffee in my case.